Hi, I'm Erin Lucy, and welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while. I am like very all over the place. I have been for a little while now. I'm trying to finish my PhD, so it's a little bit crazy and it'll probably continue to be crazy, but I do still enjoy and want to make videos, so I'm gonna just kind of be pretty sporadic. I did, just like last time, I filmed my December reading wrap-up a while ago and just never got around to editing it, so I'm going to do it again, a combined, this one will be December and January reads video. So that's what I'm going to do today, and yeah, so I'll go back now to December and then we'll come forward to January reads. I wanted to do a quick little roundup of everything that I've read in December. It ended up being just like a really fun reading month. I kind of just like did a lot of mood reading, ended up reading a ton of fantasy, and that was just really fun. So I wanted to share. So first off, we had Hakumei and Mikochi, and this is the first in these little mangas. So adorable. I'm pretty sure I found out about this through Allison Pages, and it's just really cute, like cozy. These two characters, Hakumei and Mikochi, live in this like little home in the trees. It's very adorable. They go on these like little adventures. They like ride bugs. It was just so cute in all regards. And there's like a lot of like really cute nature, but also adventure. And yes, very wholesome and fun. Next was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries, which I loved so much. I like could not even contain myself on this one. It is about Emily Wilde, and she is a scientist and she studies the folk or fairies, and she's writing this encyclopedia. So she travels to this island. It's like very remote, wintry, cold island to study the folk on that island. It is just very cute, very also wholesome, and one of her like colleagues slash rival slash friend ends up joining her very early on, and they have this adventure together, and it was just so cute. She struggles through her relationship with the people in the village there, and in discovering fairies and all the things that she doesn't understand about them. There was a lot of character growth, and I enjoyed this so much. It honestly reminded me so much of like why I wanted to be a scientist to begin with and why I love field biology so much. So that was just so fun, and I think part of why I personally really liked this. But I also loved the plot and the characters, and I found it super interesting. I liked that the main character, Emily, was like a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, and I really thought that her interactions with other people and her work were just super fun to read about. It also really reminded me of the Spiderwick Chronicles, like a much more grown-up version of that. So that was just so fun. I was such a big fan when I was a kid, so that was also like really fun to read about. So I highly recommend this. It's not like super fast-paced, but it's more like a little bit more cozy fantasy, but there is like a plot and adventure side of it too. So yeah, really loved this. It's ended up being one of my favorite books of the whole year, so much fun. Okay, next we have The Well of Ascension by Brennan Sanderson. So I read Mistborn a couple months ago now and went on to read The Well of Ascension and really enjoyed this as well. I really have just loved this series. It is about this girl, Vin, and she is a Mistborn, which means she can, in this world, they use like metals as like the magic system, and they can like use these metals to like manipulate and do different things. And you're basically a Mistborn if you can use all the different types of metals, and Vin is a Mistborn, and this is the second book in her journey. So I won't say too much about the plot, but I thought it was really great. I totally get it. I get the hype for Brandon Sanderson and this series. I just feel like he does a really good job with plot and characters, and there's romance too. Like, it's not just the fantasy, like hardcore fantasy. I just think it's like really well done, really well balanced. The pacing, I think, is really well done, especially like reading a lot of fantasy this month. I just felt like Brandon Sanderson just does a really good job of that. And yeah, I'm really glad I started to read his books. So I'll definitely be continuing with the next one. I think it's called The Hero of Ages. I think I'll talk about these next. So I ended up continuing on with the War of Lost Heart series. So I read the second one, which is Children of Fallen Gods and Mother of Death and Dawn. And these are finishing the series that I started actually a year ago, called Daughter of No World. So this is actually the first one. I just read this kind of a while ago. And I was a little bit nervous about having read it a year ago and not totally remembering, but I feel like it was actually pretty easy to get right back into. And I really enjoyed this series. Highly recommend if you're into fantasy romance. I will say, though, this is probably the darkest series I've ever read. It's just like the war and death aspect were really intense. And to be fair, honestly, probably more realistic, I would think, in like a fantasy world. But I also felt like they were like really, really dark and kind of hard to read about, especially in the world today. So I really liked it, and I thought it was well done. I just had kind of a hard time getting through that and like thinking about like life and the world. And yeah, so if you really want your heart broken, yes, I recommend this series. I think that the characters were incredible. I really liked in the second one, you get another point of view, and I love that point of view. I thought it was super interesting to read about. So yeah, I'll give a brief intro into like the world in general. Essentially, Tasana is the main character, and she was a slave who, in this book, in the beginning, she is able to break free and venture to this other land that she's been trying to get to for a long time, called the Orders. And essentially it's just what she's been planning on doing for a really long time. And from there, she enters into training at the Orders with this guy, Maxentarius Farleone, as his apprentice essentially, and starts to like learn more about her magic and train under the Orders. And that's kind of how it begins, and then goes from there. So yeah, I won't talk about the plot in these two, but things definitely get crazy, very high stakes, a lot of death. So fair warning there. Okay, so next I read, yeah, I'll just talk about all the fantasy. I read A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan, yeah. And this is the first one. This is actually 5 books. I even think there's another one from someone else's point of view, or like later on, so maybe 6. But I read the first 3 this month. This is the first one. I ended up loving this series. I also love it. It has, that's like not exactly a pleasant one to show, of a dead dragon, but it has these illustrations because it starts out, she starts out as like the illustrator and kind of like helping these men on this trip to study dragons. She has been fascinated with them by like her whole life. She thinks they're really interesting and really wants to study them, but she's a woman, and it is very like historical, and like this time especially, women are definitely not permitted to do such things. It's very looked down upon, and she kind of is able to get herself onto this journey to go study dragons in Vistrana, so these like mountainous area, with her husband. She's kind of like going along to help her husband and this like professor who is going to study them. So it's really cool though. There's all these illustrations, and the book's total is this memoir by Lady Trent, Isabella Trent. And this is just the first one. So it starts off with this adventure, and then I just enjoyed it so much. I thought that it was really interesting to read about her like as a woman, just being in that like scientific field and making these discoveries. They were super adventurous and interesting. So I loved like most aspects of it. So this is the second one, The Tropic of Serpents, and this is another adventure. So essentially each book is kind of like a time in her life, and she's like narrating. And it's mostly like about the dragons, but it's very much also about the people she meets along the way and her relationships with others. And I really love this. I thought it was so good. The second one focuses on her adventures in this like desert area and like jungle, and her finding out more essentially about dragons. So yeah, I won't say too much, but that's the second one. The third one I'm actually not quite done, but I'm gonna try to finish it today, and it is called Voyage of the Basilisk. And this one is the third, and she essentially sets off on this voyage around the world. That kind of becomes her goal, is to learn about these dragons around the world. And she actually, sets out on this adventure around the world to study dragons. So I have highly, highly enjoyed this series, like way more than I thought. I just can't believe I hadn't heard more of it. It is kind of a little bit older, like early 2010s, I think. Yeah, so the first one was published in 2013, but I'm just like surprised I haven't heard more about these. I think they're so good. It's like such, I don't know, like so adventurous and interesting, but with like a female narrator who is older. I don't know, I just like really love it. It reminds me a little bit of The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. It's kind of fun that she is narrating it as she is older, because she has a lot more perspective, and then will occasionally like give notes on that. So yes, there are 2 more, and I hope to finish them at some point, but those are what I read in December. Okay, the next book I've read, very different vein, was called Morning Glory Milking Farm, which one of the people in my book club recommended, and I don't even think I can explain the premise of this book because I think it's too explicit, but it's very smutty, and yes, it takes place in this world where like all sorts of like humans and other animals, minotaurs, centaurs, vampires, everything lives together. And I guess the best way to describe this book is like cozy fantasy. Like it gave me Legends and Lattes, but very smutty and very, like the whole premise itself is very smutty. So that's all I want to say about it. Feel free to look it up if you are intrigued. I mean, I think it was decent. The writing was not like incredible. The same author, I've read a few of her recent works, and I think it's like improved a ton. But yeah, I feel like it was decent. It was entertaining, and I just thought it was really funny that it was this like mix of like really cozy fantasy, like the descriptions of everything, very cozy, lots of adorable little coffee shops and cute little streets with people and other creatures walking. And so yes, that was Morning Glory Milking Farm. Yeah, I almost didn't even talk about that in this video because the premise itself is just, yes, a little very explicit. Okay, so I do have one more book though that is not fantasy. That is Big Swiss by Jen Beagin. And this is one that I've heard about this year. It's kind of been all over the place, I feel like. And I was interested in reading it, and it ended up coming in on Libby in the last couple of weeks, so I ended up reading it. And it's essentially about this woman who transcribes the sessions of this sex therapist between the therapist and his clients, and she becomes really fascinated by this one particular client of his that she ends up calling Big Swiss, and is just really fascinated by that her story and her as a person. And it's really interesting. It takes some turns. She is able to like recognize, like she's not supposed to, but she recognizes the people she hears in person, and that definitely like changes things. And the woman also, Big Swiss, has a lot of trauma around this specific assault that happened to her like years in the past. And yeah, so trigger warnings. I ended up liking this a lot. It's kind of what I thought, or it's kind of what I wanted from my year of rest and relaxation. I ended up personally not loving that. This gave me like similar vibes, but I liked it a lot more. I found it super interesting. It's like all about mental health and kind of mental health in society and how you perceive your own self and your own mental health. And yeah, I ended up really liking this. I thought it was like strange and funny, but was like really intrigued, wanted to know more. It is sad also and kind of hard to read at sometimes, but yeah, I ended up really liking this and definitely recommend, but definitely check the trigger warnings and know that it is kind of read, like it reads a little bit similar to my year of rest and relaxation. So yeah, big Swiss. That was like the only like non-fantasy I'm pretty sure that I read the whole month. I had hoped to read more like holiday reads. That had been my goal. It's just I have been in a bit of a struggle with reading in the past couple of months. So I've really tried to let myself just like mood read, and honestly, it's been great. I feel like it's made it so much more fun, and I'm just like loving reading whatever I'm feeling like at the moment. So, and yeah, I'm also really psyched because I'm doing great on like continuing and finishing series, because that's been a little bit of a struggle for me. I finished this Daughter of No Worlds series, so that's done now. Again, glad that's done because I need a break from all the war for sure. I have one more in this one, and Emily Wilde's the second one comes out the middle of January, and I'm so excited about it. Ooh, I cannot wait. So that's really exciting. And yeah, I have a couple more of these to read too. So feeling like it was a really awesome reading month. There's one more book actually that was a children's book, and it's called Maybe. I don't usually talk about children's books. Like occasionally I'll like read one or revisit them, but I don't usually talk about them. But this one I just thought was so cute. I've never heard of it before, and it was just so inspiring, and I feel like everyone should read it or check it out. So even if you want to like check out your library, it was just very inspirational and highly recommend. So my friend and I actually found it in a Seattle bookshop when we were visiting. So okay, so January I started with I started with Elektra. Was actually my first read, and I read this mostly when we were on our trip to Quebec City, and it is a Greek mythology retelling. Oh yeah, first of all, super beautiful. I just like love this book. I love it's gorgeous. But it's about 3 different women in Greece. Clytemnestra, who is the sister of Helen of Troy, and Cassandra, she is the princess of Troy, and then Elektra, who's the youngest daughter of Clytemnestra and Agamemnon. And it all has to do with the women, and the women trying to take control, struggling to take control in this like men's world in Greece surrounding these like wars, and the men like leaving for war and making a lot of decisions that very much impact the women. Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but yeah, it essentially all kind of surrounds Agamemnon sacrifices him and Clytemnestra's daughter, like I think their first daughter, and it's really horrible and horrific, and Clytemnestra never really like gets better from that. It like haunts her, and she wants revenge, and it's kind of this whole story kind of surrounds that, as well as, so basically after that happens, he immediately goes off to war because the sacrifice is supposed to help bring them, like, I think it's good, not just like winning, but like being like good luck on the seas and stuff like that. So, and then her youngest daughter, Elektra, is very impacted by like this behavior from Clytemnestra and really misses her father, King Agamemnon. And so it's kind of like all about these dynamics and what it means to be a woman like of royalty kind of in this world. Yes, it's tragic. It's very similar to a lot of other retellings that I've read. Ariadne, similar vibes, kind of similar to Circe too. But I really enjoyed this overall. Yeah, that was Elektra. Next we have Babel by R.F. Kuang, which I'm kind of late to the game on this one. I feel like everybody has read this already, but I'm really glad that I finally got around to it. I really enjoyed this. Probably my favorite read of the month. I've read Yellow Face and I kind of thought it was like fine. I think I just had really high expectations and I thought it was interesting concepts, but Babel was like way different. I really enjoyed this. It has like this academic side, but also like tackles colonization and like racism, the British Empire in a really like interesting way. There is a fantasy aspect of this, but it's pretty subtle. So I feel like I kind of like warn people, it's not like the most intense or action-filled like fantasy, but I really liked it. I really love how it like tackles these topics while still being like having this sort of fantastical element. And yeah, I also really liked like the learning and academic scene. I found that really fun. And it's about this boy who is orphaned in Canton and is brought to London by this Professor Lovell, and he is brought there to like learn languages and be in this school essentially, where kind of the ultimate goal is this like silver working, which is magical side of this world is through this silver working, which I thought was really unique and interesting. I hadn't read something like that. So yeah, the boy, he meets a lot of other people at the school, many of whom have been brought also from other countries and from other circumstances, and they kind of bond over that and have these like really interesting conversations and interactions with each other and with other people. So yes, really love this. I thought it was really good. However, I can also see how some people struggled with this. It's just pretty dense, and I think going in prepared for something that's like takes a little bit more effort to read, I guess is how I would describe it. It wasn't like the most easy breezy thing to read, but I really liked that part of it too. So yes, Babel. What else? We have Lightfall by Tim Probert, The Girl and the Gauldurian. And I just like love this. It's a graphic novel and I got it for Christmas and I just like loved it so much. I didn't realize there's a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end, so I didn't realize I need to read the next one. We're like right in the middle of an adventure, but I found it to be super interesting. Essentially what happens is this girl, Beatrice, she lives with her grandfather, or kind of like adopted grandfather, who is this like pig. He's there, and he sends her out to collect some things one day, and when she meets someone when she's out exploring, foraging, and when they go back to find her grandfather, because he's also looking for her grandfather, he's not there at their house, and so they start going on this adventure to find him, and lots of things happen. It's very adorable. Really loved it, so can't wait to read the next one. Okay, what else we got? We have Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh, and this was recommended by a friend of mine. It's really short. It's a little novella, like 100 pages. It's actually a duology. I haven't read the second one yet. It very much gave like fairy tale, folklore vibes. It's about this like man, I actually might read the back for this. There is a wild man who lives in the deep quiet of Green Hollow, and he listens to the wood. Tobias, tethered to the forest, does not dwell on his past, but he lives a perfectly unremarkable existence with his cottage, his cat, and his dryads. When Green Hollow acquires a handsome, intensely curious new owner in Henry Silver, everything changes. Old secrets, better left buried, are dug up, and Tobias is forced to reckon with his troubled past, both the green magic of the woods and the dark things that rest in its heart. Yes, essentially, Tobias meets this man, Henry Silver, and things begin to change. You start to figure out like what's going on and why the situation in the woods is what it is. And I just like really it's like not quite cozy because I feel like it's a little bit darker than that, but it just was like really easy read, really fun, kind of dark, but yeah, very like fairy tale-esque vibes. So highly enjoyed Silver in the Wood. Next we have Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid. And I've heard about this book for a very long time. I feel like it was like really popular a few years ago. And I think I decided, I checked it out on Libby because it was available, and I was like, all right, let's try it out. And I'm not really sure what I expected. Essentially, the premise is there is this, oh man, I don't even remember exactly. I think she's like early 20s or mid 20s, maybe she's 25. Black woman who is babysitting for this white, like upper class family. And she goes into a grocery store with the little kid, Briar, and she is like accused of by some like white woman who's just like grocery shopping. And then that woman gets a security guard, and they like accuse her of kidnapping, kind of, or like they just start questioning her and like, what are you doing here? Like, is that your kid? Like stuff like that. And Amira, who is the babysitter, she's like, no, like I'm babysitting, like it was kind of late, so there was like some circumstances around it, but yeah, really interesting premise for sure. Yeah, it was kind of late. The parents called her kind of like really last minute because they had something happen at the house, so it's like a little bit strange circumstances, but yeah. And the kid and her are just like having fun in the store, like dancing and hanging out, and someone actually films it. So the dad comes, like she's able to call the dad, and he comes immediately and was like, oh my God, no, like stop. Like she's our babysitter, like it's all fine. This is all right in the beginning. And Amira ends up talking with the guy who filmed it and doesn't want the footage to be released or anything. Then kind of things like unfold from there. And I'm not sure what I thought this book was going to be, but it's much more about the people involved. So Amira, the babysitter, the mom who she babysits for, Alex, and the families, and kind of just like ties and relationships and views, racism, all sorts of stuff like that. And I thought it was interesting, but I think it was just it felt a little bit dry to me. Maybe it's just I haven't been reading a lot of like literary fiction recently, but I don't know. There were certain things and certain people that I felt like should have had a little bit more, had like a reckoning for themselves a little bit more. I'm trying to like say without like being too spoilery, but yeah. So I thought it was pretty good. It just wasn't my favorite. So, okay, the next book is called Goal by Alexandria House. So this is guy Malik who's like really good hockey player, and he plays on this team based out of St. Louis that is it's completely black owned. All the players are black, and he loves hockey. So early on in the book, he comes into his father. It's kind of estranged from his father, and his father passes away and like leaves him the custody of his children from his like new wife leaves Malik in charge of the children from his new wife, which like really changes his life and kind of like turns everything on its head. So, and he actually hires Nuri to be their nanny basically and watch them. And I thought this was so cute. I feel like I'm always kind of on the fence about a lot of contemporary romances, but I actually really love this one. I thought it was done really well. Not too like tropey, or there was no like miscommunication or anything that was like drawn out too long, which often annoys me. So I really enjoyed this. I highly recommend. I think there's a second one, which I'm gonna hopefully read at some point soon. So had a really fun time reading this. That is everything that I read in January. It was, I think, 6 books. Definitely a little less than I had been reading last year, but I think that's just gonna be my reality this year. It's just kind of a crazy time. But I really appreciate you watching and hanging out, and would love to know what you've been reading and loving lately. And I'm really hoping to get some more videos out pretty soon. And so I will see you in the next one.